And this is probably my favorite Exalt circle we've ever had.
It definitely was pretty memorable.
So, from the start, we actually had two new players. At this point, like we said, Kazadon's player basically told us to get stuffed and left. But we had the Lone Ranger join us. And
Ironically, later I would hear from Noodle because apparently he basically just didn't talk to me after this.
yeah,
And even years later, he's like, he hates me, and apparently he talks crap about me in his game. Katsudon's player has his own world where he has stolen liberally from my setting, what I've been told. And just throws shade and says that I do an awful job, which I'm kind of saddened, but it's like at the same time I gave him many opportunities to talk to me.
right.
Say, hey man, if you ever need or if you don't like something,
Say something to us.
say something.
Yeah.
I'm not a mind reader, despite that you think that I am a mind reader. I am not a mind reader.
Right. So,
So,
he left.
sorry about that.
No. I mean, it's fair context. But in return, we got the Lone Ranger and K.A.R.D.Z, who joined our games. And so, let me call up my notes. Dutaku was so kind as to take over GM for the first session, so his character shows up a little later. First is K.A.R.D.Z's character, who was Rakus. And Rakus, if you've ever seen Desert Punk, he's very inspired by that. This very short, kind of wild guy. I believe he's in his early 20s, he said. And this really interesting story for first Exalt, because K.A.R.D.Z had never played Exalted before. But he came up with this really interesting idea where they lived in the deep south of creation, and this massive sandworm eats his brother. But as soon as he does, the worm becomes very docile and very much under Rakus's command. So Rakus believed that the worm had become his brother reborn. And Rakus now takes Wormsworth everywhere he goes, and he specialized in survival as his supernal, and he was tricky. He was one of the most dangerous among our party because he could just boom, I disappear. Boom, I just ambush you. Oh, by the way, you're not standing on solid ground anymore because that's this Wormsworth gaping maw now. So yeah, Rakus was really cool.
He was also kind of erratic.
He was a little crazy, but honestly, I think that made him kind of endearing. Then there was a ranger's character, Doran, and he was a metalsmith, a weaponsmith specifically, and this mafia organization was like, we have very specific instructions for you to forge a weapon out of fairy material. And Exalted, that's kind of a broad spectrum, so we don't know exactly what it was made out of. But Doran did it, and ended up making this terrifying, cursed, lethal weapon that would suck the energy of both the user and the victim. When he went to make the exchange, he found that the Mafia had already killed his wife and children, and Doran was left for dead. He would just barely survive and swore revenge. He was our primary melee fighter, and basically tries to keep the sword under wraps and sealed at all times. And it basically constantly tried to speak to him and get him to use it, but he basically would just tell it to go screw itself because, Doran was a man of principle, albeit one that forged his principles out of a very sad state of affairs. And then there was my character. My character was Alban. And Alban was a character I took a lot of time to design. And he ended up becoming our archer. And I gave him a prayer piece, which ultimately I only used in the first session. And I actually wrote a in-story reason for a future character why Alban doesn't have it later on. Alban was incredibly deadpan and didn't express himself. He also didn't really understand metaphor or people's emotions, and at times ended up becoming the face of the party because Rackus and Duran were just Rackus and Duran. I have it listed here due to Rackus being socially inept and Duran being socially hostile. So Alban was a field scholar for Great Forks University. Slogan, go fork yourself. We decided early on that the three characters knew each other in advance, and they were already friends. So there was no meeting arc. They were already friends. And Alban, being a field scholar, was in pursuit of truth as a concept. His primary character motivation literally was, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me no more. Which, Noodle got a kick out of.
Jeez.
And, Rackus and Duran reasoned, and probably rightfully so, that the organization that killed Rackus's hometown was the same that killed Duran's family. So they became fast friends over their mutual bond to kill these people, and Alban ended up kind of becoming the great leveler that helped even them out a bit. So we end up heading into a random town somewhere in the 100 Kingdoms, which is a very big spot on the map, as I recall. So we really could have been anywhere. We start by meeting this crazy hobo who starts spouting stuff about UFOs and an evil, shadowy government cabal. And Rackus decides to just whip out a knife and intimidate this guy. Which we actually did get some useful information out. He mentioned a castle outside of town full of murderers and thieves, and we were after murderers and thieves, so that's where we went. When the sun sank, which we decided consciously we would go at night in order to avoid obvious detection during daylight hours, we were accosted by zombies. Turns out that prayer piece I had ended up working pretty well, because those deal aggravated damage to undead and creatures of darkness. Also, I seem to roll freakishly well whenever I have any kind of fire wand on my character. Kind of a thing.
It's you being a Texan.
I guess it is.
The dice gods go, yep, you got a gun.
Gotta make this work. Mm-hmm. Rackus got us in by stealthing over the wall and opening the door for us. And as we go through, we pass through the dungeon and see a blonde person inside being beaten by this huge brick house of an aggressor. And the following exchange occurs with Rackus going, yeah, this isn't for us. This is probably their fetish. The guy inside starts shouting, no, it isn't. Alban goes, well, they might have consented to this. The blonde responds with, no, I assure you I did not. Duran goes, we should ignore them. The blonde goes, no, you shouldn't. And Alban goes, my goodness, this prisoner has a lot of opinions. And we were still about to leave. And then the captive began singing All by Myself. And we finally, the three of us were like, okay, maybe we ought to lend this dude a hand. So Alban lights him up with his prayer piece, which almost manages to deal damage to the captive in addition to the captor, and liberate K.A.R.D.Z, who is Yutaku's character.
K.A.R.D.Z the Blade.
K.A.R.D.Z the Blade, who is a lunar. I believe the only lunar in our party. I think the rest of us were all solars.
Mm-hmm.
K.A.R.D.Z, on my notes say, K.A.R.D.Z also has a tragic backstory that involved markedly less familial homicide. He was betrayed by his old team, who left him then to die, hence the lunar exaltation. Mm-hmm. We then start getting chased by the guards who were patrolling the area, and Alban, being somewhat pious, decides to invoke the gods for help. The roll was passable, but not astounding, and I summoned a Mouse of the Sun, who we talked about in previous episodes. However, the presence of the Mouse of the Sun was antithetical to our pursuer because they were a creature of darkness. So we bottleneck into a doorway where K.A.R.D.Z is attacking from one side and Alban, Duran, and Rackus held the door from the other. We actually showed teamwork and cooperation. It was great. Then, as we sneak in further, we hear about the 6 guns of Black Heaven, Ditaku, I've been talking a lot. Why don't you take this part?
Oh, it's basically the beautiful thing about Exalted is I can just take NPCs from other games that I used and just slot them in as needed. And so I had one of the six guns show up. It's a reference to a Guilty Gear song, but it's also supposed to be a series of hoodlums from the South that are all, the fastest guns. And they all are supposed to be really nasty, nasty desperados that have really unusual fighting styles and are all really dangerous. And they took this guy, this known killer, and they basically just jungled him. They just completely destroyed him. It was not even fair. I was like, oh, okay, you guys are gonna fight. You guys are gonna fight. All right, okay. And then they just completely were like, no. I think you dropped him into wound penalties like with the first attack.
Yeah, because I think it was Rakkus ambushed him, and immediately
Yeah.
he got hit in the kneecap, so he was already hobbling.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up learning the castle's original intention was to be a portal used between different worlds, and suddenly the entire thing just kind of starts sinking into the dark abyss. So we all leg it just in time to learn that the name was Castle Space Vania. So take that as you will. Session 2 kicks in, and Dutaku is now full player status, and Noodle is back in the role of the GM. And we have a hostage with us, for context, this lady that we stole from the castle. And we're like, okay, we're going to act super casual and just get a room at the inn, and we'll blend in by basically just not trying to hide, which barely works. We then try to interrogate her, which basically doesn't work, and she tells us to get stuffed. She then whips out this dark enchanted weapon, which tries to strangle Duran. And as she runs for it, Alban and Rakkus go after. And we have this out-of-character exchange where I'm like, okay, I have an idea. I have this ability. Alban has this charm that will allow me to translate one or two sentences into languages that I don't actually speak. And Cog, Rakkus' player, is like, okay, well, what's your idea? I'm like, I will shout the strategy that we're going to use to attack this lady. And I'm going to shout it in Flame Tongue, because you speak Flame Tongue because you're from the South. And then she won't know what we're doing, because she doesn't speak Flame Tongue. And Rakkus is like, okay, that's a great idea. I'll hit her high, and you'll hit her low with your bow. And I'm like, yeah, that way I'll use a Burning Arrow, which is another charm I have, and that will stop her from evading, and you can hit her high. And at this moment, Noodle makes this sound that to this day I'm still not sure if he was sobbing or laughing. And Dutaku was like, oh, hey dude, what's up? And Noodle returns with, we have a circle that doesn't suck. I'm still kind of blown away by that exchange. I love this circle so much. And Dutaku had a moment himself because the cursed necklace wire thing starts going for him. And K.A.R.D.Z is like, wait, I'll turn into a snake. Snakes don't have necks. And Noodle goes, but Dutaku, snakes are nothing but neck.
I've made a terrible mistake.
Thankfully, Duran and K.A.R.D.Z managed to fight it off and deactivate the weapon, and did not get decapitated, thankfully. But then, we ended up...
I was about to say, this is one of many times where K.A.R.D.Z is like, haha, shape-changing. It's like, shape-changing only makes it worse. Oh no!
Oh no! What have I done? And we have to kill the hostage because basically it was too big of a liability. And we're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to wrap up the body in the bed sheet and hide it in the closet. And that will give us enough time to get out of town before this is discovered. But Rakis won't stop bragging that he just got done killing someone. We could not get him to stop. So we're just like nuts to this. We're just skipping town. We run out, and K.A.R.D.Z turns into a dinosaur and offers everyone a lift. And Duran and Rakis climb on top of Mr. Wormsworth, cueing Rakis going, "Haha, I knew you would ride my worm." I'm going to have to go through the out of context thread one of these days and share some of our greatest hits. Along the way, K.A.R.D.Z asked for Alban to make a hurdy-gurdy, which is a real thing, by the way. Look it up. Alban was really, really far into woodcrafting, so I was able to cobble one together rather nicely. And then something happened. K.A.R.D.Z and Alban engaged in a rendition of the song Maiden by the River. Now, if you're having some flashbacks to previous episodes, you should, because every time this stupid song is played, either a plague wipes out the local population, or the town sinks into a sinkhole, or everything catches fire, or something explodes. But it didn't happen this time. We actually rolled really, really, really well. We broke the curse on this song. And so, in celebration, the Lone Ranger wrote the song. It's a real song now.
Yep.
Maybe in a future video, I'll post that. I'm going to ask for his consent before I just put it out there, because he may want to redo it, because that was a rough draft from a few years ago. But yeah, no, he wrote and performed the actual song, so it's a real song now. So that's cool. So yeah, we were off to a banging start, and we got our 5th Exalt, and that was Zatch. Zatch was Clockwork's character, and basically if you fuse some of the concepts between Alban and Rakis, you'd kind of get Zatch. Zatch was this wild monster hunter kind of guy. And basically, we had some issues because his player got real busy during this time. So he was kind of on-again, off-again character, but we still consider him part of the core circle. And that's where we get the K.A.R.D.Z abbreviation from: K.A.R.D.Z, Alban, Rakis, Duran, and Zatch. So if you're wondering what the heck that meant, wonder no longer.
Just before or after the point where we form a band?
Before, actually. We didn't do that till we got the giant robot. Oh yeah, it was part of Alban's backstory.
I love that that's in the thing in Exalted, and it still makes sense.
Yeah, that's not even unusual for us. Alban is a combination of many, many, many dumb puns. For starters, his base design was based on Shiro from Log Horizon. So if you want to know what he looks like, basically like that, but less expressive. So Alban's name also means white, which is how he derived his name. So I then decided to take it one step further by saying that Alban was one of 3 triplets. He had his brother Teddy and his sister Simone. I'll let you parse that one out on your own. They formed a rock band when they were younger, and Alban was lead vocalist. So apparently he actually had an incredible singing voice, just he was incredibly flat and deadpan whenever he spoke. So that caused many memes on down the road.
That actually is a thing that can happen. There's because the speech part of your brain versus the singing part of your brain is actually 2 different things.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So people who stutter often will become really good singers because it's a way for them to express themselves without going da 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 da.
Yep, that's Scatman John Larkin actually talks about that in his hit single The Scatman. The Scatman stutters, but doesn't ever stutter when he sings.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, we end up hunting an Indominus Rex. And we come to this conclusion because its stealth rolls were not that great, but an entire party of 4 Solars and a Lunar could not find the stupid thing. So once we do find it, I go, okay, nuts to this. I'm just going to bust out my prayer piece, which is my OS button. K.A.R.D.Z was already standing on its muzzle at this point. And K.A.R.D.Z is like, wait a sec, you might hit me. So Alban, who has a little bit of an ego, responds with, I never miss. And I roll freakishly well. And Noodle responds, congrats, you didn't hit K.A.R.D.Z. K.A.R.D.Z responds, you singed off my eyebrows. So Noodle responds, you're in war form. You don't have those. What was K.A.R.D.Z's totem? I forget.
It was a Claw Strider, basically a Utah Raptor, which is why he turned into a raptor.
Right, okay.
The entire thing with his is that he was supposed to have really poofy blonde hair as his tell.
Right.
So basically, I always kind of imagined him as having the 80s hairspray hair, or just
nice.
So
very nice. We were then told we made a metric crap ton of dino jerky, but then Noodle informed us that while we got 30,000 pounds of meat, we were only able to bring 500 of it back to the wagon.
Oof.
Oh yeah, then we needed to get to Great Forks, which is Alban'S hometown. And the ferry was our best bet. But the problem was we had to bring Wormsworth, and the captain wasn't real keen on this plan. So we decide that we can force the issue by having a local wealthy nobleman, one young master of the Eternal Golden Paradise. So we send K.A.R.D.Z, who uses the twin-faced hero charm to persuade Master to see things our way. Which works.
What this allows K.A.R.D.Z to do is to basically take any of his forms, and you become the opposite sex of whatever form that is. Or both, or neither.
Depending on need.
Yeah.
Let's just say, as we learned from the previous game, Master loved the ladies, so there's not too much ambiguity as to what happened there. K.A.R.D.Z would then very angrily leverage this against Alban, and demanded that he get a cool leather jacket in recompense. So during the ferry trip, Alban and Duran worked together, and we made a really cool dinosaur leather coat for him, under the proviso given to us that it would have enough belts, pouches, and zippers to qualify him as a Square Enix character.
Mm-hmm.
K.A.R.D.Z was very happy with the end result, as I recall.
Yep. It was a pretty cool jacket, as I remember.
We rolled really well, so I think it was actually considered lesser artifact tier. Because we used a crap ton of charms, because I went heavily into woodworking, and since Duran was into metalsmithing, we both had tons and tons and tons of craft charms.
Although I suppose that does make me wonder: does that make K.A.R.D.Z a garden implement? I mean, if he's selling his services for clothing.
Well, I mean, he was already a rake, so I'll just leave that joke there for people who understand really dumb, archaic jokes. Let's see. We arrive at Great Forks, and we get Alban and Duran were met with a gang of roving youth attempting to sell them cutlery, and to this day, I still have no idea what Noodle was doing. Is there an explanation for that?
Yeah, it was a bunch of... basically, it was a knife gang, dude. It was him being cheeky about...
Oh, he was so deadpan about it, I thought he was being literal, and Alban and Duran were just like, get out of here. We were not dealing with you. And we just kind of left. So I guess the muggers were more confused than we were.
Yeah, you basically told a bunch of hoods, it's like, oi! And they're like, no, get out of here. Get out of here. We are having any of this. And so, yeah, if someone you're about to mug tells you to leave, I mean...
You're just like, what? Reminds me
Yeah.
of a story, and this may or may not be apocryphal, but apparently there was a bank teller with particularly terrible eyesight, and he mistook a note saying that the guy wanted to rob the bank for a promissory note, and told him that he would have to take it to another bank, and the robber was so confused he just left because he just didn't know what to do next. Something
Well,
like...
all right. I guess I will.
All right, then. Here we also get to meet Alban's brother, Teddy. And Alban referred to him as Big Brother, but that's more literal than time. Teddy was a huge mountain of a man. And he had been married for many years, and I believe at this point they had 23 or 24 children, because they also had a proclivity towards twins and triplets, which apparently was a genetic thing in Alban's family. And
I'm so sorry.
despite being a band of murderous sociopaths, Karis, Rakus, and Doran ended up playing with the many, many nieces and nephews as Alban and Teddy did some catching up.
Karis likes kids.
Yeah, no, like actually, it was very wholesome. Like even Rakus and Doran were downright sociable around kids. And Alban at this point kind of reveals to Teddy, he's like, yeah, we're a bunch of exalts, and we're trying to like stop this band of like serial murderers. And Teddy's like, I understand, and if you gotta do what you gotta do, bro, but like be careful and come back alive. And it's this really genuine, heartfelt moment that Alban got to have, which was unusual for him at this point in the story. I like that bit a lot. I'm glad that Noodle played along with my very goofy family decisions for Alban. And now this is a part of the story that I actually can't fill in. I stepped away around the time the circle made it to the docks. I went to get a soda and some popcorn. But when I return, Rakus is explaining how the best plan we have available to us is to burn down the entire dock so we can investigate this ship belonging to a rich, missing in action person. So, Titaku, any thoughts?
I honestly don't remember.
So, okay, Alban is like, no, you're not setting fire to my hometown. we're not doing that.
I don't remember this. I remember that I had tried to use Twin-Faced Hero to seduce another well-to-do person in the town in order to get information, and I basically was told off as, good heavens, I don't need the attentions of a lady of negotiable affection. And he basically said it as such.
Yeah.
And I basically caught shade from pretty much everyone else because it's like, you can't even do the one thing you're good at. It's like, and I think I also, because I basically hinged so much on my ability to woo people that I believe I took limit.
You did
too.
You did later on too, because of Alban's lunar mate. But let's see. We realized we could just inspect this ship by having Karis turn into a crane and inspect it. Yeah, Rakus doesn't do things by halves. He was ready to torch the entire shipping district.